Have some fun news to talk about here with Dusty May and the Michigan Wolverines. 5 transfers in 5 days. I got to see one of my Buckeyes head on up to the Michigan Wolverines. Dusty May, can't stand you for doing that. Roddy Gayle, can't stand you even more for accepting that. But Kent, I know you've been following Dusty May and Michigan here a little bit. I've seen you tweeting about them a little bit here or there. What are your thoughts on just overall Michigan taking in the guys that they have? Obviously, they lost quite a few, but Dusty seems to be bringing in a number of good guys here, and I don't think they're done yet. So, what's your thoughts here?
I'm like really excited for what Dusty has done, like off the bat. Like he has gotten some really good players, but the thing is, he had to. The roster was basically empty. He had to get somebody to come in. But I am impressed with the players that he's been able to pull. I think Roddy Gayle Jr., I texted you right after that happened. I was shocked, first of all, but I think he's a great get for Michigan. Yeah. He's going to be a really big player for them next year. And, with Michigan, everything has to get better. You can't get worse than last place. This is the worst year they've had in a long time. So with the new coach, he's we've talked about this before, JR. He's instantly an improvement with the players that he's bringing in. I'm not positive because I've been on record saying this. I thought that the talent level on this past season roster was actually there. They just weren't being coached correctly. So I'm not sure that the roster at this point is actually better than last year's roster, especially because there's still some holes that need to be filled. But if you're a Michigan fan, you have to be excited of, how this last month has gone for the program. I think it's been a good start for Dusty.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's brought in a number of good players, and I know that there was thought about them having Trey Townsend. It seemed like to me that once Danny Wolf got there, it seemed like maybe they weren't as interested. I don't really get that because I feel like Trey Townsend can play alongside Danny Wolf and play pretty well, but obviously I'm not Dusty May. He knows way more about basketball than I do, so that's just kind of the sense I got from it overall. But Anthony, let's play a game here, okay? Has Dusty May so far assembled only 5 players, but so far through his assembling, has Dusty May assembled either A, a Big Ten contender, B, just an NCAA tournament team? It's a solid team. They'll be in the NCAA tournament. Not going to really expect them to win the Big Ten, but they're there. Or C, an NCAA bubble team. What would you say Dusty May has assembled so far?
It's a great question. It's hard to know with, there's just so many question marks. Brand new coach, bringing in a lot of different players. I think given his, ability to coach and develop a roster, I'd say this is squarely at B. You're looking at a tournament team, something in the maybe 6 to 8 seed range. I wouldn't say that year one they're going to be contending for a Big Ten. One, because it's hard to win. It's hard to win a conference. It's hard to contend. But on top of that, the Big Ten is also adding 4 more teams this year, all 4 on the West Coast, and I would say 2 of them are probably a leg up from Michigan in terms of where they're at right now. Maybe USC's on par. UCLA is definitely above, like they're projected to be very good next year. Washington, not so much. Oregon beat Michigan last year, so not sure, but you're adding that much more to have to contend with in the Big Ten. So it is going to make it challenging in year one to immediately contend. But I think there's a lot of John Beilein in Dusty May, and just how he coaches. I think he is a character hire for Michigan, right? They needed a culture reset in that locker room. They needed someone who could coach these players well, who isn't going to be riddled with drama, who isn't going to be a distraction. And I don't think Dusty May is that, right? He's pretty unassuming, which honestly, I think that takes Michigan back to their kind of 2010s roots of what made them into the, modern prominent brand that they were, If I could do like a football comparison, MSU bringing on Jonathan Smith feels very similar to Michigan bringing on Dusty May, right? Culture was a mess. Roster really had a ton of work like that. It feels similar in terms of the rebuild. There's a lot to be optimistic about, but temper expectations for year one.
Yeah, I mean, Dusty May obviously has the ability to take this team to new heights. Like Kent said, it's only up from here. There's not much lower you can get than being last place. Speaking of somebody who has seen Ohio State be in last place before, there's not really anywhere you can go but there. Well, I guess no, last year they were second last place. Yeah, they weren't last place last year, but still pretty much only up from there. So at the end of the day, that's what you want to see. Kent, you're looking at this team. Obviously, there is some next level this team could take. Dusty May hasn't, assembled any type of national contender so far. He has very good pieces, but I think, not necessarily something where you're going to say this team's going to a Final Four. What do you think that Dusty May has to do in order to get this team to the next step, where maybe they're Big Ten contenders or they're likely to go to a Sweet 16, Elite 8, something like that?
That's an even better question, because I was ready to answer the same question you just asked Anthony.
What
does he have to do? I think that he has to be patient. That's what I'm going to say. I think he has to take this first year and use it as a year where his expectations are way lower than the fan base and way lower than the casual fan, I will even say. I think he has to make the tournament this year, build off that, whether it's through, which he also just got a big commitment from a high school kid too. I forget what his name was. Wasn't it a former player's son or something?
Pippen. Yeah.
Pippen. Yeah. Pippen. Yeah. So he's got to continue to do that next year. I don't think that, it's something that he can jump right in with 2 feet and say, we're going to go win the Big Ten next year. Like Anthony was saying, I don't think that's going to happen. But if he takes it slow, makes the tournament next year, builds off that, maybe keeps some of the talent that he has around, and then, just does what he does coaching-wise. Like I said, he's at least competent. I've seen criticism about his coaching, and I've seen people praising his coaching. Whichever side of the fence you're on about his coaching ability, everyone can agree he's better than Juwan Howard. So if he can keep the talent, do what he does coaching wise, and then just take baby steps these next couple of years, I think that by year 2 or year 3, he will be in that conversation for contending for a Big Ten, and then be ready to make a Final Four run.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great point there. I do want to bring up some comments here. Philip says Michigan admissions strikes again, likely no Johnell Davis. I've heard stuff all over the place with that. That was my thought as well. But I also watch Sleepers from time to time, and I watched what's his name? Waddell. Can't think of his first name.
Greg.
But I watched Waddell go crazy about how it wasn't admissions, so I don't know if he was just really, really defending them on that.
He's
or
in
if it
denial.
was. Who knows? But I will say there was a guy out there saying that it was admissions, and he's on Twitter. His name is Xavier Ricks, and he's out there lying about Ohio State right now. So he's lost all credibility, at least in my mind, because he was saying the stuff about admissions with Michigan, and now he's lying about Ohio State NIL right now. So he's probably one of those fake Twitter profiles that just lies about stuff. So I'm not saying it's not admissions, but I am saying I don't believe it from Xavier Ricks. But Anthony, do you believe that it's admissions?
No. I mean, there's so many reasons for a player to not transfer somewhere in the transfer portal era. It feels like there's almost like there are rules, but there are no rules, right? Like would it surprise me if it were admissions? No, because of Michigan's history, name a bigger rivalry than Michigan being able to pick up a player in admissions, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think, Kent? You think Johnell Davis didn't come because of admissions?
I don't think that we can blame admissions until somebody actually commits, and then they ended up not coming after that. Who's the kid that played at Arizona this year from UNC?
Caleb Love.
Yeah. So he didn't commit to Michigan and then didn't get in? Like that, you can totally blame on admissions. Like that's 100% why
Howard
he didn't
for it too, because he didn't do his homework.
Well, yeah. I guess you could also blame the player for not having good enough grades to get in before committing to somewhere like Michigan. But yeah, unless you see someone like Davis actually say, I want to come to Michigan, and then he ends up not coming there. It's hard to blame it on admissions at this point. He's probably talking to, I don't know, upwards of 10 different schools right now that want him to come play. So, yeah, I wouldn't blame it on it yet until he says that he wants to come.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And Landon Tucker, our Mississippi State podcaster for the College Huddle, says, glad to learn more about the Big 10 fellas. Yes, thank you, Landon. We appreciate you being here. And then Philip, does Michigan basketball have anything other than casual fans? Yes, they do, Philip. It's just difficult to get all those fans when you're in last place. So I think they do. What do you guys think?
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah. And I think the non-casual fans, you have to give them a break because they had a miserable season, right? Like, do a wellness check on them. Like, this is, my favorite was one of my favorite bits was Wolverine Corner consistently tweeting, "This is the low point of the Juwan Howard era," but then a new low would be reached, and so and then eventually he said, like, "I'm not going to tweet again until Michigan fires Juwan Howard," and he went radio silent for the 2 weeks posts, and then when they finally fired him, he came back online. So I don't know. I think there are like real, dedicated Michigan basketball fans. They do exist, but they've had a tough time.
I can guarantee too that most really passionate Michigan fans will take last place next year, the year after that, as long as they win a football national championship every year, like they did this year. They do not care. Nobody cared about basketball this year. They're still talking about football. So, and they would do it again next year. They would take it in a heartbeat. They would take that deal I think any fan base would. And it would go either way. If you won a basketball one, I think that, I had this conversation with my buddies at the Big Ten tournament. Like, if you won a national championship, how many years would you accept being last place in the Big Ten in either sport after that? Whether it's the same sport or the, opposite, football or basketball, And I would go up to 10 years probably for most fans.
At least 5.
That's like the question Ohio State fans ask each other all the time. Would you be willing to lose to Michigan for X number of years in a row if you won one national championship? And, all the really hardcore Ohio State fans, no, it's never okay to lose to Michigan. You can never let that happen. It's like, okay, but it's also a national championship. So
right.
Let's think about this for a second.